is 6:06 and 1, 2, 3, 4. We have a quorum fix. So I would call the meeting to order. This is the first meeting of 2020 of the Smart Growth Steering Committee for the town of Hadley. And if you're ready, I'll hand it over to our esteemed PVPC professional, Kyle Fiddle.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
Good to see everybody again. Happy that the steering committee is reconvening to continue the project.
Oh, let me just, I don't know if we, point of order, Randy, should we identify everyone who's attending?
You should, yes.
I know Jim does that on the planning board, so.
Yeah.
So attending members are Mark Dunn, Andrew Gnatic,
Ronnie Williams.
and Randy Iser. And then we also, those are the voting members, and then we also have with us Kyle Fiddle, and we have our clerk, Kayla Mobile, and as long as he's here, we have Nick from Hadley Media. So, okay, I'm sorry. I will turn it back over to you.
Yes. All right. Good to see everybody again. So today's agenda is really focusing on reorienting the steering committee to the project, giving a quick progress report on where we stand. We'll have a quick little discussion on the outstanding tasks and what we can be looking forward to in the near future. A little bit of time will be dedicated just to bring everybody up to speed on our funding and the status of that and how that may influence the project in the coming months. And then we will need to discuss our next meeting time and priority next steps. So I do have a short presentation that I will share on screen. I have a printed copy for the members of the steering committee that are present. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks.
And I will go ahead and share.
I have the same screen as you.
Kyle, is your presentation the same thing as what you just handed out?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
And I'll happily send that along to the committee members so that they have it for their records.
Can I just ask,
Sure.
the PVPC is not just for Hadley, it's for the whole Pioneer Valley, so you deal with other towns also?
Yes, so
46 communities or something like that?
the 43 communities, towns and cities that make up Hamden and Hampshire counties. So we do not service the Franklin County communities. The other, what was that, 26 of those. But yes, the Lower Pioneer Valley, we are the regional planning agency for the two counties. And we are primarily funded through state appropriations. A small amount of funding comes from our member communities through annual fees. And then we're also funded federally because we act as the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is federal Department of Transportation dollars. I am a senior planner with the land use and environment section. So I primarily work with our local planning boards and on special projects. The town of Hadley is the longest participating planning board in the PVPC's Planning Board Assistance Program. And for nearly 20 years now, the planning board has had an annual standing contract with PVPC for professional planning services. So I get to see Randy and Mark and the rest of the planning board at least monthly, sometimes more frequently. And that's just a little bit about me and the Pioneer Valley. Thank you for asking. So again, today, the primary focus of the presentation is really a focus on the smart growth zoning project. And that also includes what is referred to as 40R, and that's Massachusetts General Law 40R, smart growth zoning. I can provide a little more context if you'd like. Ronnie, and for new any members of the public who are watching this for the first time and getting introduced to the project.
Yeah, and let's assume that Nicole and Kishore will be watching the recording of this.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we'll get into a little bit of the specifics of the project, and I'll offer a quick progress report. And then we'll discuss some of the remaining tasks. Again, a small amount of time on project funding, just so everyone's aware of that element. And then we can discuss next steps in future meetings. So if I may start from the beginning, provide a little bit of context for the project. The Smart Growth or 40R planning project, timely in the sense that the town of Hadley in the last, well, I guess 7 years or so now, has completed significant planning projects that are focused on the long-term direction of growth and development for the town. And this project is really, the Smart Growth project is the natural kind of next step to some of those recommendations and actions that first identified in 2017's master plan, and then reaffirmed in 2023's housing production plan. So those are two planning documents that the planning board are responsible for executing recommendations that come out of those. The master plan, of course, is a very comprehensive examination of the community. It's also often called a comprehensive plan. And the 2023, the housing production plan, that is a housing specific document that, if approved by the state's Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, provides protections against a 40B comprehensive permit, which the town would not necessarily be susceptible to, because Hadley is one of our few communities in the Pioneer Valley that has passed the 10% affordable housing threshold at the state level. So about 11.5% of homes, principal dwellings in Hadley are currently listed as affordable, which is a valuable milestone to reach. It's a statewide goal to have 10% affordable housing in all communities, and Hadley has done their part. So in 2023, the planning board was discussing some of the topics that came out of the housing production plan, specifically what is referred to as 40R smart growth zoning, which is a voluntary state program that the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities incentivizes particular zoning bylaws adoptions. And if a community decides to follow or participate in 40R, they have to prove that they have an eligible bylaw and an area of eligibility. They adopt the zoning bylaw amendments. The state Housing and Livable Communities provides an incentive payment upon the adoption of that zoning bylaw. And then every new housing unit that comes online receives a bonus payment. So it's a program that's been in place going on 20 years now from the state's level. It's the Commonwealth's approach to trying to focus on more sustainable development practices, which are commonly called smart growth.
Who gets the money?
The town.
Oh,
The town, so it would go directly to the select board. Communities have used that incentive payment for different purposes. Sometimes it is used as seed money for critical infrastructure improvements. Some communities choose to put it into some funds similar to an affordable housing trust, which may be of interest to a community like Hadley. But yeah, you can use it, and it's an unrestricted incentive payment. So back to the project, the primary goal is to craft a zoning bylaw amendment that follows smart growth principles, particularly 40R, which was the charge of the planning board. They are interested in a 40R bylaw that the community can get behind, that can be well received at annual or special town meeting, and would meet the requirements of the 40R program so that an incentive payment and a complete application could be submitted to receive an incentive payment. So to achieve this goal, members of the steering committee, residents, town officials will collaborate with Pioneer Valley Planning Commission staff, primarily myself, but others that I'll introduce. And together we're going to be working on defining what smart growth is, because it can look different for different communities. And when speaking with members of the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, they want to see a zoning bylaw that really is tailored for the community and it will work for the community. So together we will be drafting and working towards that zoning bylaw amendment that will hopefully encourage the types of development residents are interested in seeing.
I would just add that barring other interruptions with lack of funding, our current goal would be to have that something we could bring to the fall special town meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission is one leg of the project team. Again, PVPC is the regional planning agency for the area. Hadley is a member community. I will be and have been acting as project manager. For the remainder of this project, I'll be receiving support from my colleague, Aidan Hemming McMahon, another senior land use and environment planner. He tends to focus more on housing specific work, but we work collaboratively on a lot of projects. I will likely introduce the steering committee to my colleague Aidan in April, as I am anticipating needing to take family medical leave in May for my wife's pregnancy and childbirth. So I will have to step away for some amount of time, at least through the month of May. The rest of the project team is those of you gathered right now, presently, and other steering committee members joining remotely. But a committee of residents representing various stakeholders, including select board members, planning board, council on aging, and others. You all are serving as really the convener of multiple community engagement events. And you are the sounding board for the PDPC planning team as we develop the bylaw and we try to make it match what the broader community is giving us as feedback. You all are the sounding board to make sure that we're on the right course, or we may need to reconsider some things and go back to the drawing board and come back to you.
Yeah, we have some, Kyle has guided us through some steps. We've been through our first phase of public engagement with a survey that we sent out. The next phase of that is intended to be focus groups. But I would dare say that between that, there's nothing to stop us, and I would say everything to promote that we when we're not meeting, that we're talking to our community and hearing what people do and don't want, so we can bring that back
Absolutely.
to this group.
Is smart, are we focusing on housing or retail and commercial stuff
Right.
too?
Yeah. So great question, Ronnie. So in smart growth, the official name of the chapter 40R, I believe, is smart growth zoning and housing production law. So housing is a critical part of it. The state's definition of smart growth through chapter 40R includes a percentage or proportion of affordable housing
Mhm.
that is required. Typically, communities that adopt 40R like to have designated mixed use zones. Some communities choose to have strictly mixed use across the board so that a development could have either a mix of uses on a project site or even a mix of uses within a structure, often in the form of some business commercial on the ground floor with residential above on second or third. That could also look like a separate office building with a separate residential building on the same project. So mixed use can be within a single building or within a single project, more broader.
Kyle.
Yes, Randy.
Is mixed use mandated? Meaning, can we just designate that we can do a housing project or a commercial project on a site rather than having to do both?
That's a great question. I'm leaning towards saying that it's not mandated because you can write the permitted uses within the bylaw to be so restrictive that it's just residential. I don't know if that's what the community is really leaning towards. And I don't know if 40R is the best avenue to create something like that.
Okay, well, the reason I ask is my concern is that the brick and mortar retail commercial stuff is tending to fall by the wayside lately. And I just don't want us to have to be corralled into mandating that we have to have the commercial aspect if there's not going to be any demand for it.
Right. That's a very fair question. I think we can get into this a little later and probably need to at some point, but I think the kind of inherent draw of mixed use within a single structure is that you're bringing kind of a baseline clientele to a commercial or business use, right? By presenting it either above the ground floor business commercial or in close proximity, right?
Yeah,
So
no, I get it.
Yeah, so the idea is that you're concentrating that residential in proximity to your commercial and business, so that you're providing kind of longevity to those uses and those um, proprietors, business owners.
Yeah, okay,
Of course,
understood.
what they,
Of course, and that's where getting into the details of a zoning bylaw, right? You can determine whether or not, you know, the sit-down restaurant is preferable to the fast food chain takeout drive-through, right? Or a professional office is preferable to something like a bar or an evening establishment, right? You can prohibit, you know, any of those.
Mhm.
You can explore, you know, what it looks like to allow for, you know, a lot of times this is kind of the starting point for a lot of communities is what do you allow in a mixed use so that you can be respectful and responsive to the interest of residents, but also provide opportunity for the business owners and commercial uses.
can we actually prohibit certain types?
Absolutely.
And people can't go to court then and say discriminatory?
Possibly. So this is where we can get into the weeds a little bit, just for quick context, but typically, and I say typically because to our knowledge, this is all but one 40R community in the Commonwealth. 40R zoning districts are essentially overlay districts, meaning that there are extra regulations and rules related to zoning and use of land drawn over the base zoning of a community. So the way that 40R is written and practiced across the state is that developers have the choice to opt out of the 40R zoning if they have a development project that meets the requirements of the underlying base zone. There is one instance of a community that I'll correct myself. I don't believe they actually adopted 40R smart growth as a base because of some ambiguity in the regulations that they didn't feel like they were comfortable with going that way. So this is really most likely going to become an overlay district that a developer could look at their piece of property and decide we're going to follow the smart growth rules and provide up to 20% or more. You can also decide this number, a percentage of affordable housing with particular design standards, which you all will help create, with particular parking requirements that you all will help determine are appropriate. Or the developer can look at their property and say, we're going to create the same strip mall that has been on this commercial zone for the last 40 years.
Yeah, it's kind of a wide open, there's so many variables. I mean, we could overlay within one zone, say the agricultural residential, or we could overlay, we could pick an area that has 2 or 3, it could have, it could be overlaying the central business, the industrial, and it could overlap those. But it sounds like no one has then gone and deleted the base zoning under it. It
Right.
just there doesn't seem to be a benefit to that. So you leave that and then you add this as an overlay.
And within 40R, you can create sub-districts. So you can decide that perhaps if the real intention is to redevelop or invite redevelopment along Route 9 corridor, perhaps there is a mixed use district for all parcels along Route 9 with a residential peripheral sub-district that is more dense
Hmm.
than your single-family zones, or permits more multifamily type of development, or requires more dense single family. You could even, say that all of your new single family development is more dense, which 40R has requirements for density for residential uses. You could conceivably do it like that, where you would have a set of rules for the mixed use district, and then a set of rules for the residential district. All of those would be within the 40R bylaw. All of those dwelling units would receive a bonus payment upon the issuance of their building permit. So they would all contribute to, the incentives that the state has established, which I'm glad to hear are under reviews, because those values haven't changed in 20 years. They're not that incentivizing for a lot of communities, but I think it's still something to consider. And we still have the charge of the planning board to press forward with something.
Did density restrictions tend to always be a maximum, or are there minimums, or both, or
They're minimum densities.
minimum density?
Minimum densities. The maximum is really determined by the locality, the municipality that's making the bylaw.
Okay.
For the 40R eligibility, there are minimums that are put in place. And for residents, it's 8 single family units per acre, which is still, that's pretty dense. It is,
Especially compared to our town, where we have one dwelling per lot. That's pretty much ubiquitous in town,
yeah, so just for those, just for quick reference, 8 single family homes per acre, those are about 5,000 square foot lots. Correct me if I'm wrong, Randy, but approximately.
Yeah.
You're
5,000
good.
square. Yeah. For 2 or 3 family homes, so a duplex or a triplex, which could look like a stacked flat, which I rent in a stacked flat. It's very common in the older neighborhoods in New England. Excuse me. That minimum density is 12 units per acre. And then for a multifamily, which is going to be anything more than 4 units, or 4 units or more, that's going to look like a minimum density of 20 per acre.
So 2,000 square feet per unit
Right.
footprint.
Footprint possible, right?
Yeah.
And of course, the existing zoning in Hadley has a maximum building height, I believe, of 35 feet in any of those districts and zones.
Right.
I believe my impression in past conversations with the steering committee is that's likely going to stay the same. Partly due to the fact that the fire department doesn't have the equipment and the capacity to really deal with structures much larger or taller.
I think we're also, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think we've also seen some blowback in Amherst to the center of town, where they've gone up with taller buildings and more density, and that's not necessarily universally embraced.
Right. So, just quickly back to the presentation. Quick progress that we've already accomplished for the project. We really got started last May. PVPC created a quick analysis of the existing land use patterns. We reviewed the zoning bylaws that are on the books, including the zoning map. That land use survey report is available on the steering committee webpage on the town website. If you go to government, find the planning board page, there's a tab dedicated for this project on the left. You can find the land use survey report there. That also includes an appendix where we provided some model bylaw language. I didn't provide the appendix in person today because it's rather lengthy. It's a lot of paper to print. But included in that appendix is the model bylaw from the 40R program that we will use as a starting point. So that's part of the application requirement, is that you start with the 40R model and start striking through what is inappropriate and inserting what the community would like to see. So we completed that, and that was presented to the steering committee last June. Over the summer, we started crafting an online survey for the community. That was our first phase of, at the time, what we thought was a fairly robust engagement strategy. We conducted the online survey. The announcement went out in the August water bill and online. So it opened up, I believe, August 3rd or so, and then concluded after 5 weeks in early September following Labor Day. There were 320 total responses. 308 were from residents of the town, which is 5% or so, 5.5% of residents responded. There was a summary report that PVPC prepared that really focused on the top responses, the most common feedback. That report is also available online at the project webpage, and the appendix for that includes all responses from all 320 surveys.
This is our webpage. When you go to the town, I don't know that the owl will pick that up, but
I'll try to pull it up separately.
okay, yeah.
I'll
So-
circle back to it.
So as he said, if you go to the town, you hit government, you go to planning board, and then there's on the upper left, there's an option for smart growth steering committee, and then I can see there are 4 documents attached. And we will update the committee members. I have that on my to-do list.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, back to you.
All right. So in the fall following the survey is where I had to step back because we had spent so much time thinking about and discussing what would be an appropriate and eventually a pretty robust engagement strategy with a lot of different phases and concepts. Funding was getting short, and we were waiting for a response for additional funding, which I'll get to. So in October and November, the steering committee members drafted thematic FAQs, or frequently asked questions, short little responses to many questions that came out of the survey. 10 of 12 of those were drafted. 7 of them focused essentially on clarifying common misconceptions regarding housing. There was one that focused strictly on smart growth kind of as a concept and why it's of interest, potentially. And then there were 4, 2 of the undrafted that really center on the impacts of redevelopment or adopting the zoning or increased housing. So there's a range of impacts that residents voiced questions regarding to the schools, to property values, to the impacts of public safety, And there's another one clearly I forgot, but, they're just, a desire to better understand what's the consequence if the town were to adopt something like smart growth zoning.
And we wanted to curb any wildfire from misinformation. We wanted to say, we understand there are questions about this. Here are the facts as we understand them.
So those are in pretty close to final form. I think there might be a little bit of time needed to just polish those up and then to finalize the two outstanding. But that would be kind of a low hanging fruit, short-term task that would be of value to get that ready, those ready to publish and make public. Back in December of last year, as we were facing a question regarding funding and continuing the project, the planning board it was actually the Affordable Housing Trust, which the planning board is a majority of the housing trust. They authorized the use of planning board assistance funds to continue the project, with affordable housing trust funds made available once those other monies are exhausted. So we have some money kind of on standby, which I can explain a little bit later. As I said, there's still a lot of work to be done. We're not nearly ready to write a bylaw that I believe the planning board can take confidently before the town. So the remaining tasks kind of broadly, generally broken up, and the timing and the sequence of this is completely up to your discretion. It's just kind of what I was thinking of as preparing for today. We have our phase 2 of community engagement, which is to conduct listening sessions or focus groups with community stakeholders on specific themes. These could be, and we've discussed it in the past, so these could be kind of a community-wide event where it's really a theme and everyone's invited, or they could be more of a focus group style of a meeting where we sit down with an entity like the Hadley Business Council, I believe we identified at one point, or municipal department heads,
And Council on Aging.
or specifically the Council on Aging. You know, we identified small groups that we may want to just have a focus meeting to get a sense of their thoughts, their concerns, their questions.
And can you give an example of, would we be presenting the theme, or would they, and what kinds of themes?
Yeah, so it would be the theme would really be presented with some guiding questions. Like, you know, these are intended to be kind of prompting topics for dialogues, and as committee members and as planners, we're really just trying to listen and absorb as much of what the public is concerned and interested for. In terms of topics, there could be a strictly housing focused listening session. We could spend, we could mix and match so that there's a little bit of everything happening. If we wanted to do a couple of kind of evening or even possibly a weekend, out of the question, but an event where we want everyone to touch on some of those various topics. A focus group tends to be kind of all things at once with that small group of stakeholders that you know, if it's business owners and business leaders in the community, you're trying to get everything in front of them to get feedback on all of it. Other topics that may be of interest related to housing is the question of affordable housing, which is capital A affordable, which means that it's been the housing restrictions attached to the deed, either for owners or for renters, set at level determined by the Housing and Urban Development Federal Department. In 40R, in the 40R Smart Growth Program, over the entire 40R district, a minimum of 20% of all housing has to be affordable. The bylaw can determine how that benchmark is met. So you could say that, projects of, I think the way the bylaw, the model is written is projects of 13 or more dwelling units have to be X amount of affordable. You could lower that threshold. You could say any project of 7 or more units has to be X percentage affordable. You can go above and beyond the 20% threshold, but over the entirety of the district, 20% of units have to be affordable. The way the state and the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, how they regulate that threshold is they withhold the bonus payments. To my understanding, they withhold the bonus payments for those individual units until the affordable threshold is met. So in the case of, I was in, let's see, downtown Holyoke has a 40R district, kind of uphill from the city hall. So the way that development occurred within their 40R district is there was small projects happening, 3-4 units at a time, infill, filling in the very small parcels that were not touched. And so the city just never got those bonus payments for those building permits because there was never affordable units being built.
They were being
They
built.
weren't meeting the threshold. The projects weren't meeting the threshold. They weren't required to be affordable. So the city wasn't receiving the bonus payments for those because they weren't meeting the obligation of the program. So that topic in itself, affordability, it may be worth a dedicated amount of time.
And what about where you can, developers have been able to put money into the affordable housing fund, but not build anything? Is that not permitted with 40R?
That is a great question. I would lean towards fees in lieu of development, which is what you're referring to, and it's on the books already in Hadley through the inclusionary zoning bylaw. My inclination is that a provision like that in a 40R bylaw would not be approved by the Commonwealth. They would deny that because it would go against the intention of the program.
Yeah.
To allow a developer to meet that threshold requiring affordability, but pay its way out of developing the units.
I think the planning board's shying away from that process as we speak, so I don't think it would be an issue.
Yeah,
You're
Yeah.
right, Randy.
I think I'm inclined to make the payment in lieu higher rather than lower, so it incentivizes building the unit. And I think that was somewhat touched on at town meeting when a local developer said he was going to in fact with this next project he's posing was going to build the units as opposed to his first one where he did the payment in lieu. So, yeah.
So, so we have two phases of community engagement that the committee has previously identified that are outstanding tasks. We've talked a little bit about the listening sessions or focus groups, however we want to plan those, organize those, who we want to really get feedback from will shape what those look like ultimately. But we also have phase 3, which is to host at least 2 kind of wide open community forums to discuss smart growth, to really get a sense of what that means to the Hadley community, residents and others. Typically, a community forum would be part presentation, part breakout group with conversation, and then a report back that, the report back would inform the steering committee and PVPC planners to shape the bylaw accordingly.
Yeah, I was trying to imagine how that would unfold. And I have this, I mean, you as PVPC have probably done this in a number of communities. I was just imagining we might, one scenario where you have either whiteboards or you have easels with pads where you ask people to come in with questions and they could stick those with, say, sticky notes on the, and then those could define, as you said, breakout groups. And then, someone from either the committee or Kyle could then address each of those things and then come back to the group. That was just one way I was envisioning how that might happen.
Right.
But, as you've said, the goal is to hear the community, not to dictate to the community. I mean, but I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think one of the goals is for us to have at least a starting point. That's, this is what we think we heard in the first round. So here's what we're coming out with. And if they say, no, that's not what we meant, then this is the goal of the second, is to say, all right, well, what do we as a town, as a community, will we reach consensus? Probably not, but what's the majority one? Yeah.
In terms of, well, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but in terms of next steps, and just acknowledging that the project got started, got a lot of attention last summer and into the fall. I think got a lot of attention and response. For the sake of kind of rebuilding that momentum and getting some inertia behind us, I think, to me, the logical next engagement event would be one of the public forums to reintroduce the project broadly, to recap the work that's been done thus far, to offer the FAQs to kind of start shaping or reducing the misconceptions that are out there, and then to invite and get information in terms of what listening sessions could focus on or what a second forum could really focus on. But that's just the public facing work that we're asking the steering committee members to help convene and facilitate. After we receive all that feedback, we have to do the work of drafting zoning bylaws, which can be tedious, can be especially if we approach it as a committee process, very tedious and very slow. Our experience of PVPC working on similar tasks with other communities across the region is that the process is expedited if we bring you iterations of the bylaw. So that either in totality or in significant sections, we give what we think we've received. You have time to work through it, offer feedback, and we're not going sections by section, provision by provision in a public meeting, which can take a lot of time and exhaust a budget rather quickly.
I'm in favor of that.
Yeah, thank you. So that work, I think, would begin in earnest once we've completed the community engagement phases. Summer would be a good time because, you know, the community wants to do their own things in the summer. So hopefully we've gotten as much feedback as we can. We have enough to start building the bylaw. We can do the work behind the scenes, get feedback from you at a regular meeting time, and work through those iterations to get to something that we think is appropriate and acceptable to the community. In the fall, you know, we're hoping to complete the remainder of the 40R application materials, which includes a map. You know, eventually we need to draw the boundaries of what we're writing the regulations for, determining what is appropriate and where. The application includes some GIS analysis, geographic analysis. So looking at the parcels that exist, applying those minimum densities for the residential uses that we determine are appropriate, projecting out those future units of housing so that we can then create a table that shows housing in livable communities that the town is wanting to eventually allow for, you know, 300 new housing units, whatever is determined to be appropriate. And then the final requirement of that application process is to have a public hearing with the draft bylaw so that the public has its official opportunity to provide comment before the planning board really gives it its either thumbs up or not and sends it along to the town meeting. So in terms of timing, we could get that ready for a special town meeting if that's the plan.
It sounds like a lot of work. It could be next annual town meeting of 2026.
Right. And I think annual town meeting 26 is more
May 1st.
realistic.
Yeah, May 1st next year,
May 1st next year.
or first Thursday, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What? Maybe I missed this, but what is in it? And we'd have to explain this at any groups we hold for the town to adopt this kind of planning. Aside from that, the town will get some money with. Is it to prevent sprawl, to make more housing?
I
don't know if that's in something you handed me or.
While Kyle grabs his, I'll just say that there's a grassroots rumbling that you can't afford to stay in town. So there's a strong desire for affordable housing. And when we talk about affordable housing, Kyle mentioned the capital A. And you can correct me again if I misspeak, but I think of the capital A of affordable housing as that which is defined by the state. And the lowercase a affordable housing is just the regular Joe, like, you know, the middle class can't afford to, you know, I grew up in this town and I want to downsize, but I can't afford to stay here. But I don't meet the, you know, poverty or below a
That's the
certain.
capital A is the.
Capital A is as the state defines it, and it's tied to the mean income of the region, which is based out of, I think that our region is based out of Springfield. And then affordable is just more of a general sense of geez, my wife and I are trying to find a place or starter home for a young couple or things like that. And so that's where maybe denser, multiple, condos,
Mhm.
multiple family is something that could be a starter home for a young couple or a downsize option for someone whose kids have gone and they don't need the house or the farm anymore and they want something more manageable, but they
And
can't
why-
find anything.
Why would a developer, what's in it for the developer? That there are more units in a smaller space, so.
There is an economy of scale, and that's something that I think is worth exploring with developers. I think that's one of the exciting, perspectives that, Ashore, right, could bring us as a steering committee member. They're beyond the housing topic. Hadley is the state leader in preserving farmland. That's another element of smart growth is that by concentrating your housing, by creating density, you're telling developers that single family homes on 2 acres aren't what the community is looking for, right? So you're directing developers away from that green field, those untouched, undeveloped parcels. And when we are seeing a pattern of commercial spaces closing or becoming vacant or staying vacant for longer, you're creating the guidelines and really the guardrails for a developer to say, I can do a lot with that corner of Hampshire Mall, a lot more than just a single family home with an accessory unit. So there's that. There's the efficiency of bringing development close to the utilities that exist, so that you're not you have the use and utility fees that are actually going to help maintain that infrastructure for longer, rather than needing to take out large capital expenses and capital campaigns. You provide transportation choices as well, like especially if the town wants to concentrate development along the existing greenway, you're bringing residents closer to that infrastructure. You're bringing residents closer to existing bus routes. You're actually likely expanding bus option because you have greater ridership potential. So PBTA might say, that route now has 40% more ridership. Maybe we need another bus so that rather than every 30 minutes, it's every 20 minutes to spread that ridership out. And then you're also creating job and business opportunities by mixing and bringing business commerce and residents closer together. You're allowing those, employees that might be driving 25, 30 minutes to get to their retail job. You're providing opportunities for them to live closer, or the businesses to find employers that already live closer.
Okay.
So that's why it's kind of broadly considered smart growth. There's so many potential benefits from encouraging development in this way, rather than the kind of suburban sprawling type of development that we've seen in the last 50 to 70 years. Which, as Randy alluded to, in a changing commercial environment, box stores, brick and mortar establishments, there's greater risk for those. And we see that already. But very good question. Just quickly to speak to affordability. So that for those watching are aware. So capital A affordability is defined by the federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. For Hadley, 80%. So affordable is based on 80% or less of area median income. So 80% area median income for a household of 2 individuals is $70,100. So to qualify as an affordable unit, the maximum rent of an apartment for a household of 2 would be $1,753 a month. So that's capital A affordable. That's still rather unaffordable for a lot of households. And that is approaching kind of this going market rate for an apartment, 2-bedroom apartment. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but it seems to be the last time I checked, that's kind of the average market rate for rents are pushing that for 2 bedrooms.
Are we able to, in our zoning document that we're hoping to craft, specify different percentages, because I know, for example, we have the project in town, the Econolive conversion. They're doing different tiers. They're marketing so much at the 80% and under, so much at the, I don't remember, maybe 50% and under, and so much, so it would be affordable, poverty, and severe poverty, so they're trying to really help vertically down the ladder.
Yeah, absolutely. So within a 40R bylaw, a significant amount of space is dedicated to the provisions regarding affordability. So you can define that, you can set it at the 80% threshold, you could set it at 30% to 60 with, for a set amount of units. You could also say that a certain amount of affordable units have to be 3-bedroom to allow for those young families that, might have 1 or 2 children. I believe you cannot create age restrictions for development for specific projects. So I think that's one thing that can't be included in 40R. You could go, you can allow for more than the 80%. But so typically, workforce housing, quote, as defined by the Commonwealth, includes incomes up to 110% AMI and maybe 120% AMI. I could be mistaken. So it creates a restriction that's more than what the federal government defines as affordable, but it still creates a cap so that households that might make a little bit more, like your teacher or your healthcare professional or your professor, they might not qualify for federally defined capital A affordable, but the Commonwealth creates another threshold of a workforce so that they're still not burdened by market rate housing costs. And that's the goal, is to avoid that category of housing burden where a household is spending 30%, more than 30% of income on housing related expenses, mortgage, utilities, property taxes for the homeowner, and rents and utilities and insurance for the renters. Yeah, so great questions. I do want to just go back. I've got a couple more slides just to
Yeah,
make sure everybody's on the same page. Some things that I've alluded to and just want to clarify.
too.
Can I ask a question first, Kyle?
Yeah, please, Randy.
I was trying to get in, but I muted myself and I forgot. Does PVPC have access to current building costs? Because my concern about all this affordability talk, I mean, I believe in it 100%, but I don't know if it's possible to build something that's affordable unless there's tremendous subsidies.
Yeah. Yeah, I will have to circle back. I can't place the data in my mind where I would find it immediately, but I know that we have strong relationships, particularly with the nonprofit affordable developers. So we can get that data. And I think it is, of course, a very relevant set of information to have.
So that would be like the CDCs and the Wayfarers and people like that
Right. Yeah.
could say, oh, here's what these projects cost us to build and here's the cost and here's how many units, so you can.
I do have a reference or a resource, a project I was a part of. It was DLTA funded in calendar year 23. We supported the town of South Hadley. They conducted a series of, it was a speaker series with affordable housing developers. So we have some presentations from the community builders, which was they were a primary developer up in Village Hill in Northampton, which is a 40R district. I can get some numbers in terms of those projects. Of course, there are a few years out at this point, and building materials have, of course, inflated in prices.
And we don't know about the tariffs.
As we speak.
As we speak, right? It's unfortunately
It's a little fluid.
yeah, a very dynamic moment. But I've got some projects I could get some quick numbers, and then I can do some investigating to get something maybe a little bit more current.
Okay, that would be helpful. We don't certainly need it tonight, but at some point, I think it's going to be necessary to have that information when we try to decide what percentage of affordability we want in a project. Again, if you can't build it for that kind of money, then what's the sense?
Right. And I think that's, again, I think, leaning on the expertise and experience of steering committee members will be invaluable, and just keeping in mind that while the nonprofit affordable housing developers such as your Valley CDC or your Wayfinders, your home builders, your Home City, they rely a lot on subsidy, federal and state subsidies or tax credits of various kinds. The for-profit developers tend to find that proportion that helps them, turn a profit.
Mhm.
So that's what you're speaking to, Randy, anticipating that developer that may just not be able to make the numbers work if the bylaw requires 25% affordable, but you can only build 40 units. It just doesn't break even when they crunch the numbers. I think you're right. It's valuable information to gather.
Yeah, we may get at the next meeting, we may hear some feedback from Keyshore and Nicole. I think they might both be developers to one extent or another, they may have some opinions and data, but as you said, this, we might get more pertinent data from the nonprofit developers who are seeking alternate funding supplements from the state or the.
These units, can they be owned by, or are they apartments
I think you can do rental or.
Yeah, you
or
you
homeowners?
can do
Okay,
either,
Or a mix.
or a mix. Yeah, I think that really depends on.
There's a lot of
developer.
We have a lot of variables.
Yeah,
and when somebody qualifies for an affordable housing and then something happens in their life and their income is much higher, does that get reviewed every year?
yeah, so part of the bylaw would include what is called, monitoring provisions regarding that, so typically the onus is put on the developer to, either monitor themselves or to contract with a monitoring agent. So a developer like Wayfinders monitors for their own developments. Others kind of, contract that work out. But yes, it is a requirement because unfortunately, the income of the residents could make them ineligible for the affordable units.
So it's not that their rent gets increased necessarily, it's that.
Yeah, the limit is on the cost of the housing.
And great, if the affordable housing can give them a chance to get a foot here and get a job and get a leg up, then great, then it's a stepping stone and they move out and open that up for somebody else. That's my perspective.
So cognizant of time, I think we had scheduled at 90 minutes. I don't want to go too long.
Yep.
But just a quick update and to clarify where this project is coming from in terms of its funding. So it started last year, in May 2024, with a $7,500 grant, from PVPC, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. It was a part of the District Local Technical Assistance, DLTA program, which is funded annually through a legislative appropriation that all regional planning agencies receive, their fair share of a chunk of money. So we get 1/13 of whatever this, the legislature decides to allocate to DLTA. And then from within that pool of money, we, invite applications from our member communities and we award, grants accordingly. So in, early summer, we figured that this really isn't going to cut it. It's not going to get us to a draft bylaw. So the good thing about DLTA money is that it can be used for certain state grants as a match. So, PVPC, work on behalf of the town, submitted an application for the planning assistance grant, which is managed through the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. EEA is more common what we break it down to. So we applied for that funding in 2024 for an additional $22,500. So we provided essentially a 1/3 match and asked for the money. Unfortunately, and for unknown reasons, EEA has not announced fiscal year 25 planning assistant grant awards as of today.
Do we know if they got inundated with applications or?
That I do not know. The informal, hearsay that I've gathered is that, staff changes in the office have been the primary reason. We applied in late July. The typical historic, application deadline has always been June 1st. So the program is already 6 to 8 weeks behind schedule. Typically, we get word of EEA planning assistance grants in October, because we want to start them beginning of the calendar year to get a good 18 months of work. So they're just delayed. And this is essentially the issue that led to the Affordable Housing Trust freeing up some money and the planning board dedicating their budget. So the Affordable Housing Trust has, with select board approval, set aside $20,000 to supplement the budget if no other funds are available. So as long as we have a little bit of money from the planning board, which again, they have a standing contract with PVPC, they've set aside approximately $4,700 to keep the project going through this fiscal year, through June 30th. And that budget, I anticipate about 55 hours of work. So that's enough time for a few meetings with you all and a chunk of time to have a community forum and plan for that, be present for that, and to get some background research and kind of keep it going. So once that amount of money is exhausted, and if we have heard nothing back from EEA, we do have funding to finish the project
From the housing trust.
from the housing trust. Of course, ideally, we don't need to dip into that because the housing trust does not have a bottomless account.
No, right now it really has no revenue because there's only been one project that led into it, although I do, well, there has been conversation about bringing up at the next, the Community Preservation Committee meets twice a year, or actually twice per half year. And we might talk about making a standing contribution, maybe whatever that is, $10,000-15,000, something towards the housing trust too, because housing is one of the areas that the community preservation supports and promotes. So,
And the money goes toward your time and paper and surveys
Yeah.
mostly?
So primarily it's in labor costs. But if we have a little bit of money and where we want to provide, snacks, food, that kind of thing, we can pitch into that within reason. But yeah, primarily this is for labor.
and just going back to the initial intro, larger towns and cities with a larger budget will have full-time planners.
Right.
Hadley has chosen not to spend its limited budget in the past on that. It just hasn't been the gravity to say, all right, we're gonna, it takes a lot to have a full-time person and benefits and all that. So the model we've been using for, I think you said 20 years, is that we budget each year so we have professional planners as much as we need them. So,
Okay.
and we forecast for a year, whether it's, I think we've been doing 7,500 or 5,000, 10,000 a year, whatever. And so that's the model that Hadley has been using. Because the 5-person planning board is essentially volunteer. I get a $400 stipend, but I pay more than that for the phone that the state ethics says I need to have a separate phone.
So last topic of conversation, next steps. As I mentioned earlier, I think the next large task before the committee would be to plan, schedule, and program a public event, public forum, to really reintroduce the topic, get people thinking about it. It's, we're approaching annual town meeting and town elections, so I know that there are definitely dates that we will need to work around.
I'm thinking that's an opportunity that if in our April meeting, we come up with a plan, the strategy, this is when we want to meet, this is what we want to do, where we want to do it. Then town meeting's a chance that we could have a handout to let everyone know, so if we get, what do we use, Randy, what's a quorum? 100?
100 is a quorum at town meeting, and remember that you've got to get the moderator's permission to do anything that's outside of the town meeting general business.
Oh, I mean, I was just wondering if we could put a flyer on the table when people check in, there's usually information there.
Yeah, that's
I don't
all
know.
that's all town meeting related. So like I said, you've got to get the moderator's permission to do that.
Okay. Okay.
So there would be a deadline to make sure that we have all that material and.
If we only had someone on this committee who has prior experience as a town moderator who could talk to the new town moderator, that would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Who are you thinking of, Mark? I'll be happy to speak to the moderator.
Thank you, sir. Just because you don't do enough for the town, I just thought I'd reach out to you.
That's not a big deal. That'll take all of 2 minutes. I think I can afford the time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Randy.
Certainly.
So we can look forward to that. That public event happening shortly thereafter, after
Yeah.
the meeting.
Yeah.
That gives us April to,
Get our chickens in.
get every.
Get our ducks in a row.
All members of the steering committee and, discuss in greater detail that event. And provide, a draft agenda and elements that we want to include, and also get feedback and make sure we have the information that you all think residents are gonna request.
Yeah, I think if we can pull off 2 meetings in April, that should give us a plan, the chance to come up with what we want to do and then refine it and be ready for May. I don't know. That's just mine.
Yeah. Okay, so I think at this point, we're ready to look at calendars, think about how often this group wants to meet.
So we're on to item 6, topics for future meetings or next meeting. Yeah.
I think we'll be doing, next one.
Item,
Yeah, so I think the next meeting would be to have our first draft agenda for the public forum that we're looking at in mid to late May.
We got to figure out when the 2 new members can make it. Is that correct, Mark?
yes, I don't know if we need to do a doodle poll or what. We did hear Kishore, I think we saw that he basically, as I read it, categorically said Mondays don't work for him. I have every other Tuesday night with planning board. I mean, I guess I could do the other Tuesday nights.
If we went earlier, if we started at 5, then you could be done and back home for the planning board meeting.
If we don't do Mondays, my preference would probably be Wednesdays. But that doesn't work for the select board.
As long as
Member.
it's not on the first or third Wednesday, because typically on the third Wednesday, we have the DPW building committee at 4:00, and then I go to the select board at 6:00. So that day is out. So the second and fourth Wednesdays would be fine.
Okay. Or does that work for?
My evenings are pretty free, but I am having a knee replacement on April 21st. So
Oh,
I don't know how long that's gonna
But you could Zoom from home.
That's true.
You could Zoom from the hospital.
Yeah,
No, I'm not gonna be in the hospital.
if
very
you're not
long.
screaming, you can, oh, you could mute, yeah,
Wednesdays work for me.
yeah. And time, not before 5, right?
I can do 5 on
You
Wednesdays.
can do 5 on Wednesdays,
5 is good. I prefer that.
5 to 6:30. All right, why don't we float that past, the other two? But it sounds like we're zeroing in on a,
So that's second and fourth Wednesday
yeah,
at 5.
Yeah, just get a hold of the other two, Mark, and then let us all know what comes of that.
okay.
Okay. Um,
So in April, that would be the 9th and the 23rd. 23rd, you might be,
23rd might be pushing it, but
I might be too drugged up. I don't know.
yeah,
I won't be here on the 23rd.
no,
No.
I may need to Zoom on the 26th, or if we were to try to squeeze one in this month.
oh, yeah, that's possible.
Yeah, I don't know if I could make that. So,
Yeah, if we
but,
get- We can get one more in this month. I think that would be a good idea. Then we can try to get stuff set up.
26th,
yeah.
I'm wide open on the 26th.
I just committed to something with my wife, but I may be able to work around it. I may just be remote for you.
Remember who your boss is.
I know. Yeah, I know.
Can do it.
Okay. All right.
All right, so I'll ask the other two about, Wednesday, 3/26 and 4/9. Yeah, and we're talking about 5 to 6:30.
Yeah. At one of these next two, I will invite my colleague Aiden to join so that he has a chance to introduce himself and get to know everybody quickly, and then just know that he'll fill my place whenever I need to take it.
When you're changing diapers, yeah.
I will be busy. We're expecting twins.
Oh, twin?
Oh,
exciting.
geez. We're not gonna see you for a year.
Are these your first children?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, so,
do you
You're
know the
done.
genders on
yeah, 2 girls.
it? 2 girl, oh, wow,
So,
I only
yeah,
know one.
I've done.
Congratulations, Kyle.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you. But, yes, I will be taking some time.
Yes.
It'll take a little while to get used to it.
Uh-huh.
Right. Thank you, everybody.
What's your due date?
Uh, they still say end of May, but they'll induce, our last appointment's the 8th of May, so that's when I'm expecting it. If they're not ready yet, they'll,
My daughter was 3 weeks early. She's April 24th.
I would love the 5th, but we'll see.
Cinco.
Cinco, 5/5/25.
Yeah.
That's all for me then.
Okay. We covered next meeting and agenda. Anything else? Anything, Randy, you'd like to share?
No, sir, not at this time.
Okay. How about you,
No, I feel like I have some reading to do.
well, thank you. Oh, yeah, also, yeah, there, the items you mentioned. And there was there was some other resource. If I find it, I will share it. It was, there was some good stuff on 40R. We might have,
There is a webpage on mass.gov
yeah, I thought you contributed that.
related to 40R with
Okay.
a lot of information. A long list of communities that have adopted it, relevant examples of applications, a lot of information. It could be overwhelming, but it's not a bad place to go if you're really looking for a little bit of everything.
Are there any local towns that have adopted it?
Yes, in the packet that I gave you the context,
Northampton has a couple.
Northampton has a
Hadley,
couple, South Hadley has 2 districts,
But have they built in any of theirs?
one of them.
One of them.
One of them, their second district, which is down by the mills, down by the water, that one has not been successful. We actually just did an analysis of that bylaw to see what the problem is. Ludlow has a very successful district because they built it around the mill complex, so that's all 40R. Westfield has a district that they've done nothing with. And that's the only example of a district with absolutely nothing in it, or with a community that's done nothing with it.
And that's what I'm hoping that we will be like branches on a tree that, we, the members of the committee, will be having all these little twigs going out to people we know in our circles of the community and get feedback and bring it in so that we really tailor this to be successful. Because if we come up with something that the market doesn't really support, it's not going to go anywhere. And we'll have put all of our time to not having, but if we can hear what the community needs, and I'm sure Kishore can tell us what he sees from his market research as a developer. I don't think we need oil rigs. We might need something very different. We're seeing, maybe pickleball courts or.
Is there a limit of how small an area can be allowed?
Yeah, so the state Housing and Livable Communities Office, they've stopped accepting applications with a single parcel, even if that's a large acre parcel.
Mhm.
There's actually a concept map that the Office of Housing and Livable Communities shared with the Hadley Planning Board back in 2023. That's included in the packet I gave you, Ronnie.
It's kind of like initial negotiating. I want to give you a penny, give me $1 million. They wanted like the whole Route 9 to the east. And that, of course, so there's got to be some middle ground that we could all.
It is limited in terms of, I don't think the total district can be more than 10 or 15% of a community. So you couldn't just say,
Yeah,
we're all 40R.
right.
But in terms of the minimum size, they want to see a grouping of developed or developable parcels. They want to see infrastructure. They want to see transit. And
Is the survey that we did and the information you had in it, is that available to the public?
the survey summary, which is.
Oh, I mean, because like when you took the survey, you saw like
Okay.
you showed different housing styles and scales,
Right.
and that's kind of a nice place to start to get a sense of
Right.
what we're trying to get at.
Yeah, the survey itself is not, but I will resend the PDF of the survey. And we can get it back on the webpage so that you can see the survey, you see the summary of responses, and then you see all the responses as they are analyzed from the SurveyMonkey application.
Well, if
So,
you
yeah,
send
I'll
that to
get-
me, I could put it on the website.
I'll get it to you, Kayla. Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla. Kayla, if you have access to the website, can you update the membership of the committee?
Yeah, should I wait for the new members to get sworn in, or should I just go ahead and do that?
Yes, please. Yes, I would wait till they're sworn in. I just saw that one of our resigned members is still on there, so.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else, or I would entertain, Andrew, anything? I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, in a second? All right. Roll call vote to adjourn. Mark Dunn, aye.
Andrew Gnatic, aye.
Ronnie Williams, aye.
Randy Iser, aye.